Nice to see you again.
You made it.
Yeah, I made it. Yeah.
All right, good evening, everyone. Call the Winnebago County Board meeting to order. Tonight is Thursday, July 13th, 2023. Tonight's invocation of Pledge Allegiance is by Board Member Michael Thompson. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come together tonight and work in the best interests of our constituents. We are reminded of the trust our community has placed in us to work together as a whole group. With your guidance, we will succeed in compromising and do the right thing for our community because it is the right thing to do. We ask for your grace as we remember your teachings when we consider how our votes affect our community as a whole. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, are there any adjustments to the agenda this evening?
No changes to the agenda, thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Gummow, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we will start with Mr. Salgado. Present. Mr. Scroll. Mr. Sweeney. Present. Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Webster. Here. Mr. Arena. Mr. Booker. Present. Mr. Butita. Here. Mrs. Crosby. Here. Ms. Fellers.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel. Present. Mr. Guevara. Present. Ms. Hansard. Here. Mr. Hoffman. Present. Mr. Lindmark. Present. Mr. McCarthy. Present. Mr. McDonald. Present. Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. 16 board members present, 4 board members absent.
Please, thank you, and please acknowledge Mr. Arena is present. Okay, we do have a quorum this evening. We'll move on to our awards presentations, public hearings, and public participation. Tonight we have 3 speakers. I'm going to read a brief statement and then call the speakers up. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address zoning matters which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatened litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement on what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. All right, so we have the first speaker is Reverend Earl Dotson Sr. Please come forward.
The Bible. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid because his parents saw he was a proper child. By faith, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasure of sin for a season. This faith of discernment helps one see clearly the relevant and ignore the irrelevant. Every child is an expression of faith in the future. By faith, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, renouncing prestige and power to be identified with a race of Hebrew slaves, the people of God. Faith in God's promise allows for such discernment. Discernment aided my inspiring conversation last month with the Dean of the Illinois Congressional Delegation, Danny K. Davis, my friend, lauding the manufacturing proposal I submitted to him and others, like Tony Preckwinkle, Brother Chiarelli's counterpart in Cook County, that portends a payroll for Chicago of $475 million and Rockford of only $30 million, totaling $500 million. The revenues will approach $1 billion, in line with President Biden's emphasis on manufacturing. Let's get together, he said, Congressman Davis, the 1st or 2nd of August, as Congress is in session for the entire month of July, but not August. I'll be free. And let's go forward with this proposal that will change dramatically the economic and political landscape of Illinois, possibly urban America, certainly throughout America, and certainly the city of Chicago, my hometown. Sadly to say, many in Rockford and some others places lack discernment, choosing rather to be Pharaoh's playthings rather than relying on the promises of Almighty God, hurting themselves and the people they misrepresent.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mel Welch.
Step two.
Very good.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation to attend this committee meeting. And I am representing tonight, or I am the ambassador for the Navy Club of Rockford. The Navy Club of Rockford is the oldest club and or ship in the United States and has the number 1. It has been, as I said before, well over 100 years in existence. They have a membership of well over 300 active, but one problem happened, and it's called COVID. So as a result of COVID, they went for 3 consecutive years with absolutely no income whatsoever. And when they tried to open, the first thing they did, obviously, in the summer was to turn the air conditioning on. It would not work. It's a commercial unit. It can't be repaired. So thus they have a facility with no air conditioning, very inadequate water heater. In addition to that, they are currently funding it personally, and we were very fortunate enough to address State Representative Dave Vella, who through his kindness was able to allocate to us and present to us a couple weeks ago a grant for $50,000. We won't be receiving the money for some time, so I'm here to ask you tonight if in fact you can help us in any way, because quite frankly, the Navy Club is broke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Next speaker is Denzel Winter. Mr. Winter, come forward, please.
Good evening, County Board. My name is Denzel Winter. I live over on the northwest side of town. And I have been, I don't want to say targeted, but I've had guns put in my face for no reason. And when I try to ask them why, they won't tell me. I know this last time, and this happened 3 times. The last time they did that, they took my family, because I was taking my family to the doctor. They took me and my daughter over on the west side, over on the east side somewhere, and they took my son. My son had missed the court date. So, but they tried to make me say that that was my son that took that lady at Pinions. And when they got the graininess out of the picture, it was not him. And then on top of that, you know, they treat us like we're criminals. They snatched me out the car. I got 2 replaced knees, 2 replaced hips. I got a pacemaker. What threat could I be to them? You know, it's got to stop. The other day, I seen them guys roll down on a group of kids, probably 11 to 10 years old. All they was doing was walking down the street. And then you guys don't understand why the kids get bent out of shape because these police stop them and harass them. That's got to stop. They need to police us the same way they police any place else. And I can guarantee you this don't go on in an all-white neighborhood. And it needs to stop. And you guys are going to hear from me again because I'm going to be out there in the neighborhood, patrolling my neighborhood. You know, it's time that we get treated just like everybody else. Yeah, our color skin is different, but that don't mean that y'all have to treat us any kind of way. One incident was they threw a lady down on the ground. She's still trying to deal with the injuries that happened. And that don't make no sense. All you have to do is be human. Half the time, people will listen to you. They're not trying to fight with you guys. They're not trying to get hurt. But one of these times, I know, 3 times in a row, that I had guns put in my face, and they never told me why they stopped me until afterwards. The sheriff said, I got an open door. When I went down there to try to talk to the sheriff, that was a lie. So I don't know what we can do, but we need to do something before somebody really gets hurt.
Mr. Winter, your time's up.
Okay.
Appreciate coming in.
Well, thank you, but something needs to be done.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our approval of minutes. Can I entertain a motion to approve the June 8th, 2023 minutes and the layover of the June 22nd, 2023 minutes? Moved by Mr. Guevara, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion on the approval of and layover of the minutes? Sir, we're in session at the moment. Mr. Winter? We're in session at the moment. Thank you. So again, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Board member discussion? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the approval and layover of those minutes? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Thank you. Number 7 is the consent agenda. Includes the raffle report and the auditor's report. May I entertain a motion, please? Motion by Mr. Hoffman, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the consent agenda? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Number 8 are the appointments. We have no appointments to read in this evening. We'll move on to our reports of standing committees. The first committee is the Finance Committee. Mr. Butita.
Okay, first we have a ordinance for a budget amendment for a circuit clerk project manager, and I ask for the rules to be suspended on that.
Moved by Mr. Butita to suspend the rules. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Crosby. So, any board members opposed to the suspension of rules this evening for this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. The rules are suspended, Mr. Butita.
I so move then that we approve the ordinance for budget amendment for our circuit clerk project manager.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. McCarthy. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the passage of this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
Next, we have a resolution authorizing an increase in the salary of the Winnebago County Public Defender, and I so move.
Moved by second by Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita, any discussion from the chair?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
Next, we have a resolution authorizing Voya Retirement Insurance and Annuity Company as Winnebago County's 457B Deferred Compensation Plan record keeper, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Hoffman. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
And then next would be the ordinance for the approval of a budget amendment to change the County 457B plan vendor, and I ask for suspension of rules on that.
Move to suspend by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Thompson. Are there any board members opposed to the suspension of rules for this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. The rules are suspended. Mr. Butita.
All right, I move for passage of the approval of a budget amendment to change the County 457B plan.
Moved by Mr. Butita to approve this ordinance, second by Ms. Hansard. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? All right. Are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
All right, next is a resolution authorizing use of Winnebago County Health Department surplus bond funds to pay off the bond of 555 North Court Street, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Ms. Gorel.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Martell couldn't make it here tonight, so in her presence, she has asked Jim Keller, who is our Director of Finance, and Bob McCreed, who is Chairman of our Winnebago County Health Department Board. They are here to answer any questions that any of you board members might have on the two items that are coming up right now. So please meet them. They're sitting out here in back. You probably have never seen either one of them before, but please be free to ask either one of them any questions. Thank you.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for attending. Is there any questions or discussion on this resolution before the board this evening?
Chairman, I'll go ahead and just...
Mr. Butita.
Thank you. So this is to pay off the funds that were borrowed to purchase the 555 North Court using the funds from the Winnebago Health Department Fund. And so in doing so, we'll deed the building over to the Department of Health, and they will be responsible then for maintenance and capital improvements going forward. And in addition, they've agreed to allow the Veterans Commission to remain there rent-free.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Butita. Any further discussion on this resolution? All right, hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to the passage of this resolution? Mr. McDonald and Mr. Lindmark and Mr. Booker as no's. Please cast yes for all remaining board members. Mr. Butita.
Okay, now we have an ordinance providing for the payment of certain outstanding bonds of the county and authorizing and directing the execution of an escrow agreement in connection therewith. And I ask for the suspension of the rules.
Move to suspend by Mr. Butita. Do I have a second? Mr. Sweeney seconds that motion. Are there any board members opposed to the suspension of rules? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Butita, the rules are suspended.
I move for the passage of the ordinance providing for the payment of certain outstanding bonds of the county and authorizing the execution of the escrow agreement.
Moved by Mr. Butita, second by Ms. Hansard. Is there any discussion on this ordinance?
I would just add, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the ordinance to finalize the payment of the bonds, I believe. Correct. All right.
That's correct. Any board member discussion on this ordinance? Good. Are there any board members opposed to passage of this ordinance? Good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
Okay, and finally, we have an ordinance for approval of a budget amendment to reimburse the general fund for 555 Court Street bond payments, and I ask for the suspension of rules on that also.
Move to suspend by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Thompson. Are there any board members opposed to the suspension of rules? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita, the rules are suspended.
All right, I move for the passage of ordinance to approve a budget amendment to reimburse the general fund for the 555 Court Street bond payments.
Moved by Mr. Butita to approve the ordinance. Do I have a second? Ms. Hansard seconds that motion. Is there any board member discussion on this ordinance?
Yes, and so this is, at some point in time, the Health Department fund was unable to make the payments for that building, and the money, $1.5 million came out of the general fund to make those payments. So this is money coming from the Health Department fund to reimburse the general fund in the amount of $1.5 million.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. Is there any board member discussion on this ordinance? Are there any board members opposed to the passage of this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Butita.
That'll be all, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. The zoning committee, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. We have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Economic Development Committee, Mr. Sweeney.
We have no report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Operations and Administrative Committee, Mr. Keith McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Operations is 4 resolutions this evening. The first is resolution awarding therapy services at River Bluff Nursing Home, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Hoffman. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution to approve new laundry and linen services at River Bluff Nursing Home, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Butita. Any discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution awarding printing services bid, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last item is a resolution authorizing the execution of a tournament agreement between Blackhawk Bank and the County of Winnebago, Illinois, for the property located at 4505 North Main Street, Rockford, Illinois, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Speaker McCarthy. Is there any discussion? Ms. Gorel.
And my understanding is that Stepping Stones has the loan on this building with Blackhawk. If they, what is our part in this since we own the land?
Mr. Thompson or Mr. Schultz, would you like to answer that question, please?
So the county owns the land, Stepping Stones owns the structure, the facility. They have a loan with Blackhawk Bank to make improvements at the facility. And so the attornment agreement is an agreement between the county and Blackhawk Bank that if the current tenant defaults on the loan, that Blackhawk would negotiate with a new tenant, and the county agrees to abide by the terms of the lease with the new tenant.
Excuse me, shouldn't it be just the opposite? Shouldn't we be the ones who take a look at the new tenant to see if we can even approve of them, since we own the land? And if they go into foreclosure, they can sell that building then to anyone, who knows what, that the bank so desires to sell it to. Should we not have first refusal on that property if that comes to being in default because we own the land? Do we not have a right to put into that contract that
Maybe
we
our
also
state's
have the
attorney
right?
might.
We also have the right to approve of whoever buys that building.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. So we currently have a 20-year lease with Stepping Stones for this property, and we also have a right to terminate the lease if we so choose, if it came to a default in the mortgage payments. But this lease has been in place since 2000.
But is it time to amend it, since we do own the land and we don't want them just selling it to anyone?
Thank you, Chairman. It was amended in 2015, I want to say, by the board. A couple amendments were made, and that was attached to the packet. If the board would like more amendments, I can discuss that further with Stepping Stones. But this proposal today is only because they're taking out additional funding to make repairs to the building.
Okay. But Blackhawk is also looking at it as if they ever default. And that's where we would have to come in on that.
Correct. And I would like to add that the county already has an existing attornment agreement from 2018 that was approved. This is more of an housekeeping item. It was my recommendation that instead of doing this administratively, that the committee and the county board formally approve it. But in 2018, it was just signed and agreed to by the chairman at the time.
And do you feel that that would suffice what I'm asking you of?
If your request is for a change in the lease, I would have to know exactly what that amendment will be, and I would have to talk to Stepping Stones.
Mr. Sweeney?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think Ms. Goro brings up a really good point. Is this a time-sensitive issue with their financing for sure? As in 2 weeks from now would be, be a deal killer for them? Because I guess I'm thinking like, what if a scenario happened where, a government, us, owns a piece of land and they sell the building to whatever, but let's say it was like a controversial or very embarrassing type of deal for the government to be owning land with I'm not gonna say out loud what it could be, but there's things out there that would be very interesting. If we were put in that scenario, what, under the current agreements, what remedies would we have to get out of that situation?
Thank you, Chairman. So I would have to look at the entire lease again, but I believe you have to have a certain use. So even the new tenant would have to either have a similar use as to what it is now or have an agreement with the landlord, which is us, to change the use. And we also can terminate the lease if we so choose.
So even if we were to, in your opinion, we pass this tonight, and then we go to them and we figure out if we are potentially exposed to a scenario like this, we could probably still negotiate in good faith to maybe amend something just to make us happy if we are exposed at all?
Possibly, but I forgot to answer your other question. The closing was actually delayed on the loan because it was my recommendation that this go through you, the committee and the board. Originally, the attorney for Stepping Stones thought that the chairman would just sign the attorney agreement and then they could have closed about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And after I recommended this process, they had to reschedule. So this is time sensitive. So I would recommend that it move forward, but I can discuss with them further if the board wants to amend the existing lease.
Okay, and I'll vote to back up what you recommended them do with their delay, but maybe we should just ask the question after the fact to see if that's a scenario we might want to mitigate. I don't know.
Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Stepping Stones owns the building,
Correct.
and we own the land. We're leasing them the right to have their building on our land.
Correct.
And so if we were to terminate our lease, how would that play out? Like could not come on into their building on our land? Would their building have to be demolished? I mean, what is that? What is the effect of that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how this was created back in 2000. I would have to discuss it with the attorney who represents Stepping Stones to get more of a history. But that if we were to terminate the lease, I don't know what that would mean for the actual tenants and Stepping Stones' use of the property.
Okay. You don't know how this all originated?
No. Thank you, Chairman. When the attorney for Stepping Stones reached out to me with this attorney agreement, I had to actually get copies of the old lease from 2000, the attorney agreement for 2018, and look at all that paperwork to figure out exactly what she was referring to, because she previously was discussing this property with an attorney who passed away in our office several years ago. So she gave me some history, and then I had to locate some older documents. So that's when I found out that the county does own the land and Stepping Stones owns the building on the land.
Okay, but our lease controls the use of the building?
Correct.
Okay, so I think we're protected from it being anything.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Ms. Goro?
My concern is if they ever had to foreclose that the bank would be able then, because they will own the building, that they will be able to sell it to anyone and everyone they want to. And that's why we should have first right of refusal on that building, so we can control, because, I mean, look at where it's at. You know, we own that whole campus out there. And we need to be able to control who goes back into that building. And that's where my concern is. How about you, John?
Well, I also share those concerns. I do think you bring up a good point, for sure. I mean, yeah.
Now, we should be able to control this. If that ever goes into foreclosure for any reason, we need to be able to control who goes into that building. It's government land that we're talking about.
The lease is between the county and Stepping Stone, so if there's a change of ownership of that building, it would have to be renegotiated with the county. That's a very typical land lease, when people are entering agreements between a land lease and somebody building a structure. So the bank is only the lien holder. They would not be able to do anything other than have stepping stones in that building.
But what we're talking about right now is the lender is asking us about a new mortgage for stepping stones.
New loan, correct.
So they still have the right to sell the building if it ever goes into foreclosure.
Well, I think the attorney will look into that, but that's not typically how land leases work. But
It's
she
something
should,
to think about.
yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you got
If we
the,
would be responsible.
yeah, you have the attornment, which you're dealing with this evening, but you are absolutely right. You need those questions answered about the lease agreement.
Okay.
That's what I believe you're both talking about, the lease agreement. Ms. Fellers.
My question is for the state's attorney. Is there anything that could, is there any way that the bank could compel us to enter into a lease with a new owner of the structure? So if Stepping Stones were to default and the bank sold it on a foreclosure sale, is there anything that compels us to enter into a lease agreement with a new owner?
It's my understanding that a proposed new tenant after foreclosure would take the property subject to our lease, but we can terminate the lease if we choose to.
So it doesn't matter who owns the building, we don't have to lease it to them?
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Mr. Guevara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Donald. What was the vote in committee? Do you remember?
Unanimous.
Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of an attornment agreement is to, we're stating that we agree to continue the lease with any subsequent owner after Stepping Stones if the bank forecloses, right? So this idea that if they sell it to someone we don't like, we can't necessarily terminate the lease because we don't like them.
Yeah, it has to be for a reason.
Right, okay, but I'm looking at the lease now, and it says, leases shall not use, and then, for any purpose or purposes other than the purpose or purposes for which the demised premises are leased under this lease agreement. So a new operation couldn't come in and open a bar there. They couldn't, they'd have to use it for whatever thing that Stepping Stones is using it for. So it could only be a new, you know, if they're providing services to a certain population, another provider could come in and only do that. So even though we're agreeing to extend the lease, there is that control over it.
Yes, we need control over that.
Right, and it is here, so I just pulled it up, and it's on page 128 of our package. So I think you made a very good point, you're right, but I think we're covered.
I would like to see us have first right of refusal if that lease ever goes into foreclosure or if they want to sell it.
So if the attornment agreement, if the lease was originally started in 2000, and it was a 20-year lease.
And then it renewed.
Oh, it renewed for another 20 years.
Correct.
Okay. So we don't have the opportunity to do that, but I think we're safe enough, and I think Stepping Stones is a great organization, and I trust them. And, you know, I trust Blackhawk Bank too, you know, they're local here, so they have the interest of the community at heart, so I'll be voting yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goro. Any other discussion on this resolution? Torment, Ms. Crosby?
When we take the vote, I'm going to recuse myself because they're clients of my company.
Very good. Duly noted. Any other discussion on this resolution? Okay, are there any board members opposed to the passage of this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present, except Ms. Crosby is withdrew. Yes. Mr. McDonald?
That concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Public Works Committee, is there any report from Public Works tonight?
No report for Public Works this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Webster, Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Mr. Lindmark?
No report tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Mr. Lindmark, thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, we have appointments that were read in on May 11, 2023. They are for the Chicago Rockford International Airport Authority. Annual compensation is $1,800. That's for Mike Shablasky. That is a reappointment, which ends in May of 2028. The second is the Pecatonica Cemetery Association. There's no annual compensation. And those appointments are for Larry Holton. It's a reappointment ending June of 2029. Gary Meyer, reappointment ending June of 2029. Ron Larson, reappointment ending June of 2029. Glenn Weigert, reappointment ending June of 2029. Lori Finley is a reappointment ending June of 2029. Steve Van Vlecht, reappointment ending June of 2029. May I entertain a motion? Moved by Mr. Thompson, second by Ms. Hansert. Is there any discussion on these appointments? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to anyone being appointed? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. The next set are appointments read in on June 8th, 2023. That's for the Cherry Valley Cemetery Association. Annual compensation is none. That is for Pat Stageman. That is a new appointment, and that term ends in May of 2029. The second is for the Zoning Board of Appeals. The annual compensation, if there's 12 meetings, is $1,200. And that is for David Daly. That is a new appointment, and that ends in May of 2028. May I entertain a motion on these two appointments? Moved by Mr. Webster, second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion on these two appointments? Very good. Are any board members opposed to these two appointments? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. New business. Is there any new business in front of the board this evening? Very good. Next are announcements and communications. Clerk Lori Gamal.
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Very good. Thank you, Clerk Gamal. Mr. Webster.
Bear with me here. I just want to read this correspondence that I got from a guy. Okay, so this fellow, I've known him for a while. He contacted me recently about a zoning issue, and I referred him to Troy Krupp. And so he responds to me. All very kind and much appreciated. We generally only hear the complaints, so it's nice he took the time. This was Lori's response. He sent this to me, and he said, Jim, thanks for your directions. Following your advice, I made some calls to the zoning office, then went down to speak to them personally. I discussed my questions with both Adam Sider and Troy Krupp. They were both very well-informed, patient, with an old, hard-hearing geezer. They answered every question I asked, gave their informed opinions on things for which there were no definitive answers, and directed me to assessments for some other questions. There I first spoke to Lottie, then got my answers from Tom Hodges, a very nice, helpful man. Following that, I went downstairs and had a reunion with Lori Gummo, who used to be a student of mine at RVC. It is hard for me to express how very impressed I was with every one of these public servants. I could not have asked for more informed, intelligent, and people-friendly officials. Please pass on my wonderful impressions of the work they do for all of the public and the board. Okay? So
Thank you,
it's
Mr.
very
Webster.
nice that we don't hear that, as Lori said, we don't hear it that often, but, we do have some great people working here.
We concur. Mr. Lindmark.
Yeah, I'd just like everybody to keep in their thoughts and prayers the family of 10-year-old Destiny Huggins and the first responders. I know firsthand that ones that are at the scene are struggling, so prayers out to the first responders and the family of Destiny Huggins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Limart. I'm going to go to Ms. Hansard now.
That was what I was going to say as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other board member communication? Mr. Webster. Moved by Mr. Webster, second by Mr. Thompson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are opposed. We are adjourned.